So, we have this anti Columbus sentiment continue to grow. There are people taking to the internet right now expressing their hate for Christopher Columbus and say that he committed mass genocide. He hated, the indigenous people. He was an awful man, greedy, stupid, murderer, all these horrible, terrible, awful things. So, what do people do in response to this? Let's take a look. So, Christopher Columbus statues toppled in Richmond and beheaded in Boston by these crazy rioters, nonetheless. Statues of Christopher Columbus were targeted by protesters rioters, in Massachusetts and Virginia on Tuesday night in an act of solidarity with indigenous people. The 8-foot-tall memorial to Explorer in Richmond, Virginia was pulled down with ropes and dragged roughly 200 yards to a nearby landing at Foundation Lake, according to the Richmond Times. It was also reportedly briefly lit on fire. The base of the statue was covered in graffiti, and protesters held signs reading, "This land is Powhatan land, and Columbus represents genocide." A makeshift headstone poster was also placed in front of the sunken statue in the water that read, "Racism, you will not be missed." Here's a picture showing what's going on there. The figure was reportedly the first statue of Columbus erected in the South. Okay. Let's scroll on here. They also beheaded one in Boston overnight. So here's the narrative, right? They're saying Columbus is bad, he's evil, we got to tear down his statues because he was a terrible, awful, evil person. You have people like this on Twitter. Gets online and completely bashes Columbus. He says things such as how, the first part here, he talks about how stupid Columbus was. He notes that he wrote an entire book as a legal defense to a case he and his heirs lost on that rape, torture, indigenous genocide, mutilation, despotism, and tyranny, which we know became his governorship, was cut short when he was arrested, brought back to Spain in chains, tried, and only got out because Isabella intervened. Says he tried to wipe out the Taino people, that's genocide, and advocated importing slaves from Africa to the Caribbean as slave labor. So you have these things where they talk about Columbus commits mass genocide, hates, indigenous people, wanted to enslave them all, yada, yada, yada. Well, there's a source. I'm going to put it down in the link. You can go there. It's Wall Builders, and they've done extensive research on Christopher Columbus specifically. And when I say that, they've actually gone and found original documents, journal notes, historical documents about the journey and things that were going on during that time that you can trace back. And they've done extensive research. And you know what they do? They post all their sources down at the very bottom. So if you don't believe them, you can actually click on them and go to the sources. Whereas the guy on Twitter says, "I'm a historian, I know these things." Take whoever's word you want, but I'm going to go with where the sources are. So now, they have multiple articles on this. One, specifically him addressing slavery, his education status, an overall story of his journey. I'm going to go through this one right here. This is specifically with regards to his encounters with the indigenous people on the islands that he visited. And actually, before we get to that, I would like to show you, because a lot of people might not know, the roots of his journey. So you see it's his first, second, third, and fourth voyage, all of them centered around, like the Bahamas, Cuba, the Caribbean Sea, South America, Central America, that area, not up here on North American continent there. Okay, just wanted to clear that up because a lot of people aren't really certain where he went. So let's start with the article here. All arguments making Christopher Columbus a villain comparable with Adolf Hitler or Saddam Hussein start with the premise that the world he discovered was populated by peaceful inhabitants who lived in a golden age. It was only with the introduction of the white man that the paradise was destroyed by tyrannical oppression perpetuated by the European Christians. So this is what you hear, right? That it was these peaceful tribes, they live in harmony. And Columbus shows up with his fellow white men, and they enslave the people, commit genocide, and treat them terribly. That's the narrative we hear. Now let's look at what happened. So the current romanticized presentation of the native cultures is the underlying assumption which permits the narrative that Columbus was a villain. Academics push this to justify tearing down statues of the explorer and removing his name from the calendar. Proponents of the alternative to Columbus Day, which they call Indigenous Peoples Day, are also proponents of alternative history. Um, so they reference Howard Zinn. He's a massively influential yet famously inaccurate work, A People's History of the United States. You can look, a lot of his work has been, debunked. It's not accurate. Columbus and his successors were not coming into an empty wilderness, but into a world in which some places as densely populated as Europe itself, where the culture was complex, human relations were more egalitarian than in Europe, and where relations among men, women, children were more beautifully worked out than in any place in the world. Okay. With what we read next, you're going to see that was a load of crap, because he said the relationships were more beautifully worked out than anywhere else in the world. If you include cannibalism, rape, and sex slavery, and, child cannibalism, more beautiful than anything in the world, then yeah, that would fit with your opinion, but I don't think most people consider that the most beautiful thing in the world. So according to Zen and other, historians, the indigenous people were far more advanced in their social morality than Europeans. This leads us to the conclusion that white man is racist, tyrant, opposing whoever he can. And this puts bad picture on, now Americans. So what they fail to account for is the facts. The world Columbus discovered was full of slavery, murder. Okay, like I said, genocide, all these terrible things. And he says he briefly referenced that in the Aztecs, but some other tribes on these islands that Columbus met were like that, and we will get to that. So here we go. He, on his first voyage, the first tribes he meet, I believe it's the Taino, but I'll get to that in a second. They were extremely friendly to Columbus, so much so that Columbus declared that a better race there cannot be. And both the people and the lands are in such quantity that I know not how to write it. He just said about these people on these islands that he just met that a better race there could not be. That is the opposite of what a racist says. A racist says that other races are inferior, terrible, and they're despicable, and that their own race is the best race. He is literally saying that people of this race that he has met, this ethnicity, there could not be better. They are the best people. For this first tribe he met. Keep that in mind. But, of note, this society that he met, they were not pacifist society as often portrayed. The first tribe was part of the Taino community, which occupied many of the islands in the West Indies. They held those islands, however, because they themselves had conquered, driven out, and replaced an earlier Siboney culture. And we see this throughout history. People throughout the entire world history have either been conquered or conquered other places. You see this all the time. People move in, people get pushed out. People move in, people get pushed out. So I believe they're putting this in here just to make the point that, just so you know, it's not only white people pushing other people out. And even then, that's not what Columbus did here, and we'll get to that. The Taino domination was so complete that Columbus only ever encountered one such Siboney native. The Taino's warrior culture was noticeably lacking when compared to the truly savage culture of the Carib or Canib tribes. By the way, where we get the words Caribbean and cannibal. These indigenous people were feared by the Taino because of the constant raids and attacks. During their first voyage, the Taino told Columbus about this extremely ferocious eaters of human flesh who visit all the Indian islands and rob and plunder wherever they can. Columbus actually had extensive encounters with the Caribs during subsequent voyages when he was coming back on 2, 3, 4. The things they saw corresponded exactly with the descriptions given by their Taino friends and many other atrocities, which they had failed to mention. For instance, and some of these are awful, for instance, the Caribs would spend up to a decade plundering any particular island until they completely depopulated it. Then, through slavery and cannibalism, they would cannibalize the men, so kill all the men and eat them. They would enslave the women and the young boys. Okay, so I'm going to read to you some accounts of the sailors and the, Columbus's crew and Columbus that encountered these other Carib and Canib tribes. Some of the descriptions could be considered a little graphic. If you don't really want to hear this, you can go ahead and, just click off now. But if you want to know what actually they talk about seeing and encountered and the atrocities that occurred that you like to blame on Columbus, maybe go ahead and listen. So, one of Columbus's crew members left us with a description of what the Caribs would do with their captives, saying that he found 12 very beautiful and fat women from 15 to 16 years old. Together with 2 boys of the same age, these had their genital organ cut to the belly, and this we thought had been done in order to prevent them from meddling with their wives, or maybe to fatten them up and later eat them. These boys and girls had been taken by the above-mentioned Caribs. The testimony by the Taino of cannibalism was confirmed by the amount of human bones and even cooking limbs found in the villages. Another shipmate on the voyage, the lead doctor, also related in depth the terrible acts of the Caribs, and here's his explanation. In their wars upon the inhabitants of neighboring islands, these people capture as many of the women as they can, especially those who are young and handsome, and keep them as body servants and concubines, so sex slaves. And so great a number do they carry off that in 50 houses we entered, no man was found, but all were women. Of that large number of captive females, more than 20 handsome women came away voluntarily with us. When the Caribbees take any boys as prisoners of war, they remove their organs, fatten the boys until they grow to manhood, and when they wish to make a great feast, they kill and eat them. For they say the flesh of boys and women is not good to eat. 3 boys thus mutilated came fleeing to us when we visited the houses. So this group you're accusing of genocide and murder and wanting to wipe out the indigenous people is actually saving some of these people and getting some of these people away from sex slavery, abuse, mutilation, and cannibalism. I would say that's actually a good thing. You can debate on that if you want. If you think maybe those people should have stayed there and Columbus's crew shouldn't have saved them, then we can debate on that. But I think it's a good thing to get these people away from that, because that is a sick, messed up life to live. The same doctor describes another instance where they came to a Carib slave camp. As soon as these women learned that we abhor such kind of people based on their evil practices of eating human flesh, they felt delighted. These captive women told us that the Carib men used them with such cruelty as would scarcely be believed, and that they eat children which they bear to them, only bringing up those they have by their own native wives. Sounds like racism. Such of their male enemies as they can take away alive, they bring here to homes to make a feast of them, and those who are killed in battle, they eat up after the fighting is over. They claim that the flesh of man is so good to eat that nothing like it can be compared to it in the world, and this is pretty evident for of the human bones we found in their houses. Everything that could be gnawed had already been gnawed, so that nothing remained of them but what was hard to be eaten. In one of the houses we found the neck of a man undergoing the process of cooking in a pot, preparatory for eating it. Okay. So these horrible atrocities that were witnessed were committed by other tribes on these islands against other tribes on other islands. So before you go even saying that Columbus and his crew were the racist, genocidal people, take a look at what's going on here. Take a look at what is going on there. Does that sound racist and genocidal, what these tribes are doing to other tribes? They kill and eat people of other, groups and ethnicities, and then even have babies takes the women's babies and eat those too of the other nations and only let the babies live that are from their own people? That to me sounds like the murder and genocide, not the man who came in and said, wow, this is a great race of people. Oh, you're being abused and mutilated and eaten and killed and, come with us. We're going to save you. That sounds not like the person you're describing when you're tearing down these statues. So this is what bugs me. you have these people coming on and saying historians, and I'm sure there is stuff in, Columbus's writings or whatever. But if you're pulling stuff from this Zen guy, maybe don't go with that. Look, well, I just closed the page, but if you look down here, they have all these sources you can go click on. You can follow up. You can see where all these journals and stories come from. And just buying in to some historian who claims, because he's a historian, that Columbus did all these awful, terrible things, he committed mass genocide and all these things, that doesn't mean it's true. Did he maybe do some of the things that guy mentioned? I don't know. I didn't look into if he left his wife or left his son or any of that. He might have well done that. He might not have. I don't know. But that's not the argument. That's the big point being made. He threw that in on top of everything. The reason you don't tear someone's statue down for that. The reason they're tearing down his statue is because they're saying he was a racist, genocidal maniac that wanted to destroy populations. They also claim he was stupid, and there's an article on the same website here that shows how much knowledge he had for his day and how, ahead of everything he was and how impeccable of a sailor he was and everything. Shows all his accomplishments. But the guy downplays that too, because if you give him credit on anything, then you're also a racist, genocidal maniac. So, all in all, to wrap things up here, you see this mob cult mentality of, I don't even know what you call it. You can call it the Twitter mob. You can call it the leftist crazy mob. Whatever it is, it's this group think mentality where if something fits a narrative, they're going to take it and absolutely run like hell with it and just go off the deep end with whatever they're told without critical thinking and looking into the situation. I mean, when these places have all these sources for you to look at and really examine the situation for yourself, you think people would actually go look, but they don't care. They don't care. A lot of these people, their goal is not to actually know the truth. That is not important. They don't care. As long as what they say is the loudest and is what is the most heard, they're okay with it. So, again, they like to start with the narrative and then make things fit that narrative. So instead of saying, hey, let me figure out what Columbus said himself, what people around him said, and the stories behind Christopher Columbus, and then make my decision, here's how they start. They start with, white people are racist. And, one of the big stories is how white people first came over here and found the New World, and that has to do with Christopher Columbus. We celebrate him, we have statues, and white people are racist. How do we show that he was racist? And then they go in and just absolutely tear him apart with either partial truths, twisted truths, or complete non-truths. And you come up with these crazy, absolute, hysterical people that go behead statues, throw them in lakes, and do God knows what else to destroy his memory and the history of him and abolish his holiday. And this isn't just, necessarily fringe group of people. A lot of people, they're actually taught these things in school. Because a history professor said it, and it's in the history book, they go along with it. Because I actually had some friends that went to school, and, they came back saying, yeah, I learned that Columbus committed mass genocide. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe go check out, see if there's any more to the story or see what you're missing. Because there's a lot here. And you see this with a lot of things. All in all, let's wrap things up here, because we could go on forever talking about how crazy this is. Christopher Columbus is not the person they're making him out to be, and they want to completely destroy his memory, his history, and everything about him. It's wrong. We need to speak out, right? So what we need to do is we need to have these discussions and talk about it. And if you question something like this, or if you question what these people are saying, maybe it's not about Columbus, maybe it's about something else. If you have even the slightest doubt that maybe they're telling the truth, look into it, or ask someone who looks into things in depth to come up with the sources and then give them to you and look at them and provide them for you. because it's important to know the truth, right? We need to know the truth before we're making all these crazy accusations and decisions from just descend into anarchy of, people going absolutely insane. So that's going to wrap up this segment for today. If you guys did like this information and you want to see more stuff like this, leave a like, subscribe, you'll get notified and all that stuff. But if anything, share this video and, let people know about source stuff like this that goes on that people completely make up. And especially too, don't just share my video, go to that website, share these links and these sources with people. That is a great resource. They actually do a lot of good work with historical documents and everything, and they have a huge collection of just historical items and documents, and it's amazing the amount of stuff they have. And they do extensive research just on history of the United States, and they debunk a lot of the things that are said based on the evidence they have. So I encourage you to check them out anytime a question like this pops up. They're a great resource, wonderful people over there. That's pretty much it. Thank you guys for watching, and we will see you in the next segment. Try not to tear down any statues. See you next time.